All right, cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's really awesome to see you guys. Welcome to the Graph Builders Office Hours. We have a special episode with Mac. Mac is going to be talking about initialization and handling, block poll handling. Or polling block handlers. Sorry about that. It's early morning for me. Thank you so much for joining. And as everyone knows, these sessions are recorded. So please keep that in mind. Eventually, they're going to make it onto YouTube. So if there's any issues with that, make sure you turn on streamer mode and just be mindful of that. So without further ado, Mac, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, and excited to see what you had for today.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Hello, everybody. GM. My name is Mac or Kent. I represent Graphica as well as the Builders DAO and the Advocates DAO as well. But I'm speaking with my Builders DAO hat on today. And today we're going to be speaking mostly and kind of really discussing polling handlers and initialization handlers, which are a new feature. I think they have been in the GraphCLI for about a month or couple of weeks now, but the documentation has only been updated about in the last 2 weeks. So it's hot off the presses. If you know about it, well done. I hope that you've been using it. And if you haven't used it yet, some exciting stuff. And I'm very, very keen to kind of open up the floor at the end on discussions with regards to how we can use it in some new use cases, because it really does open up a lot more opportunities and also just kind of optimizations to your workflow and your code when you're building subgraphs. So let's jump into it directly by looking at the docs. We have this, but their names are going to be polling filter and a once filter. So you can go and find it over here in the documentation if you would like to look at them, but I do have a presentation lined up. So first, we'll start off by talking about an initialization handler. Whether you spell it with a Z or an S doesn't really matter. But the way that this new block handler runs is it runs only once at the first block indexed. So if you have a data source and you add a block handler and you specify once as the kind, it will run this handler only once at that point. It does require a spec version of 8 or higher. And just some notes on the initialization handler, that it will run after the event and call handlers that are emitted in that same block. So if you have the first block of a contract has a bunch of events and a bunch of calls that are happening, and you want to do some work before that, I would suggest that you kind of set your start block of your earliest contract where you're doing this sort of initialization handler to one block before, so that it won't it will run before any of the events or call handlers are emitted. And you can obviously set an initialization handler on each data source. The way that I've done it in my example is that I just set it on the one data source, or the earliest data source. So if you want to do it for each sort of data source, you can. Just to note as well that it is just a block handler, and you will only be getting the Ethereum.block data type available in that handler. So let's talk a little bit about use cases. So the reason why I'm excited about this is because myself and Slim submitted a GRP back in, I think, May last year, and it was one of our suggestions that we wanted to see added into the subgraph tech. Unbeknownst to us, it was actually on the issue list from earlier that year, and I think polling handlers were on the issue list since 2019, or even before. So it was in the roadmap, which is quite. At least we think like the smart folks at the graph. So we were very, very stoked to see that this has come to fruition. So some of the use cases is to kind of set up initial entities before your events and calls start firing. As a lot of us know who are building subgraphs, you sometimes have entities like global entities and some other entities which you set up before you start, or you set up once on startup, and usually you would have maybe like an on-startup function. And the way that you would get around this in the past is that you would check if this entity is null, then you would set it up. And then if it isn't null, then you would ignore the setup. But this isn't so elegant. So this makes it a lot more elegant. You can just do all that setup in this initialization step. Another thing that's pretty cool is that you could possibly grab on-chain data, or you could pump you could push through a IPFS hash into a template and grab that and start doing some work with that as well. So you could essentially go and query and get a whole bunch of information that you need to start templating, or start doing setup, or start putting into some of your entities. But the most fun use cases are really, for me, are the templating use cases, and also the static data use cases. So in the example that I've set up, I've essentially just taken 5 ERC20 addresses, and I put them in an array, and I've just templated them during the initialization. So this does work. Even though they aren't emitted at that block, it'll just set them as a data source and just wait for them to actually start emitting some information. So this is pretty cool. You could essentially have a subgraph that only tracks a subset of ERC20 contracts or pools or whatever, and you could specify this in an array instead of setting up 20 different data sources for each one. Or if you don't want to go and start indexing off an ABI, because as we know, if you leave out the contract address in a data source, it will match on ABI. So this sometimes has a little bit of weird side effects because you're essentially grabbing every single one. So you could do a lot of cool things like set up approved list, or a sort of approved list of entities or contracts that you want to track in an entity beforehand. So you could kind of like whitelist the tokens that you want to track, or the contracts that you want to track in an entity. So you can always look that up and check if it exists there. But one thing that I'm very excited about is the static data that you could put inside of your subgraph before you start indexing everything. And you could do this in one step, which could help to make your decentralized application more serverless, or fully serverless. You could put in, your like Next.js, you could have server-side rendering through a subgraph. So you could actually put pages, you could put React and stuff stored in an entity. It's one thing that I'm thinking of. You could do lots of cool things like users and permission gating and stuff like that. So lots of cool ideas with regards to storing static data on setup. So that's some of the use cases. I'm going to just show you an example that I've quickly built here. Just for this. So we've got, handle setup, which is a block handler, as you see. So handle setup is a filter of kind once, and that will essentially look like this over here. So I've got handle setup, and I've got an array of contract addresses, and I'm just iterating over these addresses, and I'm templating each one of these addresses, which is an ERC20 contract. And it's as simple as that. You could obviously go a little bit further than this, but this is one of the use cases that I mentioned, and it is as easy as that to be able to do it. And then obviously your ERC20 data will then start running. Any questions or any remarks on this before I carry on? We can also leave the questions to the end. Cool. Okay. Next one.
Did you show the subgraph manifest?
I can show it, yes. Here we go. So we've got spec version 8, and we've got block handler, and over here underneath the polling handler, we've got handler, handle setup, filter, kind once. So once is the flag for making this a initialization handler. So this will only run once on this, and it'll work for templates as well, but I've only set it up over here.
Thanks.
Alrighty, no worries. So we've got polling handlers next, and as the name suggests, it's a handler which allows you to run this block handler every X blocks. So what it'll do is it will run on the first block index, and then I think on the first block index from my testing, and then every X blocks that you specify. It also requires a spec version of 8, and as with the one before, it will also run after any events and call handlers that are in the same block, and it will only have the Ethereum block data available. What it looks like is like this. So it's a handler, the name, filter of kind, polling, and you can say every X blocks. So I've got it doing it every 10 blocks. And let's look at some of the use cases. So some of the more simple some of the more obvious use cases for this are creating snapshots or time series data values for, across every X block. So if you want to, get some epoch data, you want to match the epoch on chain, this is a great way to do that. So every 30,000 blocks, or depending on the chain that you're running, you could essentially try and match every single epoch and do some calculations, go back and start scraping data from the current entities that you have. Lots of cool things that you can do. You can do monthly data if you want to. If you can try and find, that's why I put a little squiggle there. It's quite hard to do exact months with blocks, but yeah, it's you can try. What's also really cool about this is that you can call on-chain view functions to grab specific information for this time series. So you could say TVL or liquidity in a pool. If the on-chain view function is available, you could call that on-chain view function and essentially store that in this entity which you create on every X block. So if you want to get the TVL after every 100 blocks, or the TVL after every 1,000 blocks, you can then just hit that view function, or get the liquidity after each one of those. You can hit that view function, grab it, and store it, which is quite nice. And you can do this with an array of other view functions. Obviously, view functions do have a detriment to indexing time, but using them with responsibility, it's good. You could also do some cool things with aggregations and block range entities, and essentially storing information against storing an entity with IDs as block numbers, and then putting those back up, aggregating on block number, and then running across all of those block numbers across your range to get an aggregation across all blocks that have been created inside of your range. And I've got an example of that as well. So as I said, it's great for matching epochs and doing some work on the subgraph. So if you want to, go back and look at all the pools that you have at currently or throughout your ecosystem, something like Uniswap, and you could go look at, how many transfers have been done in this epoch, depending on block number, how many trades, how much liquidity has come into the ecosystem. One thing to note in my testing is that you have to be careful how many store interactions you're doing, because I was playing with doing every 100,000 blocks, but I was also trying to query block numbers 100,000 times in this handler, and it essentially conked out the subgraph. It stopped it entirely and made it start from the beginning again, which was quite funny. But I found a kind of nice medium with either like 10. You'll see my implementation and why that possibly failed. So yeah, just be responsible with how many store interactions you are doing within this block handler, within this polling handler, because you can immensely slow down your subgraph and even stop it. So in my example, I've got handle 10, and I tried with 100,000 as well, because I wanted quite a large range of data, and I'm polling every 10 blocks. I've got two very, very simple schema, some entities. I've got a block transfer data. So this is essentially created on every single block where there is transfers happening on the ERC20 contracts that I am tracking. So I've got 5 contracts, busy being, I think, five templated contracts. Yes, 5 templated contracts that are creating a block transfer data entity if there exists a transfer in that block. And then if the block exists, then what I'm doing is I am adding the value to the previous value. And if I know that this is across many different ERC20s, but obviously you would kind of whittle it down to specific ERC20s. This is an example. But if the block transfer data doesn't exist, then we just create it. So for every single block, we have an aggregate of how many tokens have been transferred across 5 different ERC20s. Now that's just the block data. If we go to the handle 10, now I've got some code here, which you can see here that I commented out the store removed just so I had some more entities to look at, but you could also just go and remove that block transfer data entity if you wanted to, because after you're done grabbing the data off it, you can get rid of it. But what this does is it goes and it grabs the current block and it minuses 10 from it to get me the last 10. So then I create essentially, instead of, you can't go forwards because nothing has happened yet, so it's always best to go backwards in time. So I'm essentially going, okay, cool, I'm at 9,500,000 blocks. I want to go 10 blocks backwards, and I want to see how many of these block transfer data entities exist. So I load them. If it doesn't exist, nothing happens. And if it does exist, then I just increase the transfer aggregate and I'll remove that block data. And then if this transfer aggregate is more than 0, then I create a 10 blocks aggregate, which essentially has an ID of the 10 blocks where it started and the 10 blocks where it ended as its ID. So it's easily viewable in its identifier. Can obviously turn that into a bytes if I want to. And it has a transfer aggregate and its start block and its end block. Very, very simple. We can view the subgraph over here, and you can see here that I have 95 entities, and I've got a whole bunch of different amounts on, between these blocks. So between 9,569,052 and 62, I have, I think, about 8 tokens being transferred, and another 8 over here. So you can see that this is working, and you can see obviously that the templating is working as well. So as I said, you can go find these two new block handler types inside of the documentation in the link that I've posted. Now, lastly, I've got a little bit of extra on top of this, since I caused a little bit of a hubbub inside the indexer chats in the last 2 weeks. And I want to talk a little bit about grafting as well. So grafting is a feature that's been around for quite some time, and I've had some successes and some failures with it, which is quite fun. So you can, obviously the way it works is that you can graft a previous subgraph store from a specific block into your subgraph, right? And the main thing is that the schema should match mostly. You can obviously have new entities that haven't been created, but the store entities that you want to copy over should match. And the note that I want to bring up is that I did a graft on a subgraph that only existed on the hosted network, and I was under the impression that you could graft across the hosted network to the decentralized network, which is very wrong, and it ended up being needed to be added to the documentation. So just for anybody that is using grafting, it can't be used across environments. So you can't graft from a hosted server subgraph into the decentralized network without some pain for the indexes. But the big wins that I've had with grafting is that, I had a block subgraph that was taking about 120 days to sync, and with a graft, it went under 24 hours. So, and it's really, really good for large subgraphs that need a lot of time to index, a lot of time to sync. If you need to do a small update or fix, use grafting because it's quite easy. I will post a link to the code. I haven't deployed it just yet. Posted it on GitHub, but I will. But that's about it for this week. Nice, short and sweet. We can leave more time for conversations and chats. One thing I wanted to bring up is the graph will be at all of these events in the coming months. So please, if you are in the areas, please make yourself available at these conferences and come say hi to the good people at the graph working there. I know the Boulder style is going to be there, the Africa style, and all the other core development teams. If Global is happening this weekend, and if Online is going to be is obviously an online hackathon. So if anybody wants to participate in an online hackathon, the graph is sponsoring a bounty there. And then for November, there's ETH Istanbul, which I know is going to be a big fun one, as well as ETH India coming up in December. So those are the different events that you can look forward to inside the ecosystem where the graph is either sponsoring or attending. Thanks for your guys' time. You can find me on Twitter at these links, or if you would like to apply to the Graph Builders DAO, you can scan that link. It'll take you to the website for the Rust, for Rust, if you're looking for lots of substream developers. So
thank you, Mac. That was really awesome. One of the questions was, is your code for like the subgraphs and stuff like that public somewhere that you can share in the chat?
I will post it right now.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Welcome everybody. That's first time. That's awesome. We got a first timer here. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Mac about that? About what he showed off? Anybody questions in chat? Feel free to come off of mute here. Okay, cool. Well, Mac, again, thank you so much for presenting that. That's like really awesome stuff. I'm excited to see what people build with that, especially at the hackathons. That'd be a really cool one to give to some of the hackers just to see what they can do with it. So those are really cool features. And yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And we're just going to keep the office hours open. So for the next 30 minutes or so, if anyone does have questions, yeah, please just pop them in, or feel free to come off mute, or if you want to talk about anything, just let us know. And by the way, Mac, you're still sharing your screen.
Yeah, cool.
I'll ask a question if the room's if there's other questions here.
Yeah, what's up?
I heard a rumor, something about like indexing off-chain data, and I can't really find information about that again. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say indexing off-chain data?
Do you mean like IPFS or like Arweave, like data file sources?
Honestly, I was hoping for clarification on what that meant. So it could be something that I might just be repeating something that was incomplete.
I think there's a lot of groundwork being laid to be able to query off-chain APIs with file data sources. I know Simon's here and some of the other smarter people in the ecosystem, but file data sources is currently the way that we query, or the better way to query IPFS and Arweave data. But I know that there's a lot of groundwork going into allowing and testing for querying other APIs, which could be quite funky. But obviously, the problem is determinism. So
yeah, I mean, like I wouldn't say like smarter is a big word. I'll probably just have a little bit more insights into the current developments. And but Mac is completely true. Like when it comes to off-chain data, we can say there is IPFS, which worked for a good amount of time. Then we have file data sources, which is the better implementation. With file data sources, it started with IPFS. Now Arweave was just, I think it's shipped. No, I'm not sure if it's in an official GraphNode version, but at least on the trunk, we have Arweave as file data sources. And coming up next would be file data sources with arbitrary HTTPS requests. But also, as Mac pointed out, like there's these considerations, like the problem with these is when it's just an arbitrary endpoint, and two indexers might see different content when opening up that endpoint. So like so the question is like, how do we handle that? Do we really make the users aware of the quality of that data, and if so, how? Or yeah, so there's some stuff. So, but if you have ideas around this, feel free to go to the forum and participate.
Interesting. Okay. I think I understand. I think I was looking for more of a clarification on what to expect from that, but that's super helpful. I think I'm looking forward to that. I think I can take advantage of that in the future, hopefully. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and also just thinking about some optimizations that I could have done to my polling handlers code is, I'm storing block data for every single block that has interaction. One thing that I would do now for the next push is to actually just store that block in an array on that larger aggregate entity, pull up that aggregate entity, and only iterate over those blocks. Because if you want to go over 10 blocks, but there's only one block within those 10 blocks, it's kind of wasting a little bit of load time. But now if you scale this up to 100,000 blocks, this would obviously be kind of very adverse to iterate over 100,000 blocks that don't exist, or 100,000 entity IDs that don't exist. So it's early days, and I think that as more people use it, we'll definitely be finding really, really fun and cool implementations on how to use this. So I'm going to keep thinking and trying it out, but I know already I've got like 4 different subgraphs where I'm going to be using the initialization handler and the polling handler, especially for some of the ones like I did a fork of the Uniswap Masari subgraph, and they do have some really, really good aggregations in there, but I'm thinking I'm going to use the polling block handler for some of the other aggregations to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'd love to see those subgraphs after you kind of do that, just to see what your changes are and how you did it. But it's really cool. What other use cases can you think of with polling?
I guess you could also for this NFT collections that have a reveal time, you could essentially, it would be cool to be able to dynamically add this polling handler, but you could essentially have like an initialization once and run a polling handler every X times to check if things have been revealed, because some collections, as they're minted, the NFTs are revealed, and they're not revealed as they are minted. So you might mint it, and then after a set amount of time, the NFTs metadata and images are only revealed then. And a lot of NFT contracts do not have update metadata or update like the update metadata event being emitted. So that's one other way. But I think there's like a combination of using file data sources and these polling handlers, and especially the initialization handler with file data sources can be very, very powerful. Yeah, you could definitely do a lot of funky stuff. I'm really, really keen on doing some I guess uncharted territory work and essentially putting a whole bunch of HTML in entities with initialization handler, and then calling the subgraph to get different pages, and could essentially load up different pages for different users.
That's a very great idea. I'm kind of trying to convince the team of Nimi. Do you know Nimi?
Nimi?
Nimi.eth.limo. It's kind of, you can go.
Sorry, go for it.
You can go to this one. So like it's a very cool project. So that it builds a front end out of data that's stored on your ENS.
Oh yeah.
And so you have kind of your business card, crypto business card, whatever. Anyways, but like they have problems. Actually, they have problems with that one of when they store the rendered HTML, CSS somehow in IPFS or something like that, and then sometimes it takes a long time to resolve. And I think now they even fell back to a centralized service, or I don't know what's the latest. But like I tried to tell them, like, hey, why not you just store all the HTML, CSS, JavaScript in a subgraph?
Yeah, I got that idea from doing this description, because like one of my friends who was like really like kind of crazy about descriptions was like, dude, please can you figure out how to put games on these descriptions? So if anybody doesn't know, descriptions are essentially like ordinals on Ethereum. You essentially make a 0 ETH transfer to yourself or to someone else, but then you put a whole bunch of data that's been hexed. So you put like a base 64 image, base 64 string as an image, which is then hexed into the call data, and the descriptions pick it up and display images. But then one of my friends was like, you could do that with HTML. So I kind of got the idea that you can store a whole bunch of HTML inside a subgraph, and I'm busy building the substream for descriptions, which is quite a lot of fun. It's just, decoding all the different things and making sure that I don't pick up any other wonky data. But yeah, you can play that game. You can play this little things with your arrow keys if you want to play a little bit of Mario. So it's quite.
I'm playing it right now.
It's only got 4 levels, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of cool things that we haven't really tapped into with regards to storing what we can store on subgraphs. Also to answer your question, Schmitzy, about that line in the manifest, that is an anonymous event handler. So since these ERC20 contracts are not verified, it's best to always put an anonymous event handler, which is just the topic 0 event signature. It's basically the event signature, which is SECA cached, and that way it can always grab the event without any sort of fail.
What, isn't that redundant? I mean, like the topic 0 is basically the SecCap hash of the event.
Yeah,
signature.
It's redundant on templates, but I think I ran into an issue a while back where I wasn't getting transfer events until I put that in, but that's probably been fixed. It was quite a while ago. So it's just an old habit that's I'm trying to kick.
Okay, wow, thank you. do you know from top of your head, like, I think that we can only have topic 0 filters and not topic 1, 2, or 3, right?
As far as I know, yeah, only topic 0, which is the anonymous event handler. But it would be cool to have. Then another way that you can use the topic 0 is for the same event being used in different areas. So if you have, being used in different ways. So if you have the same event structure, but if it's used in this is in the documentation somewhere. I know that Sebastiano from I think he used to work at Protofire. He put me onto this, and I think it's inside of the documentation. I'll find it now, but you can use it to. Oh, there you go. No, it's not. Well, they're using his example, which was log note, but essentially, if you've got that log note in many, many different areas, you can use a different topic 0 to basically figure out where it's coming from and have a different handler. I'll have to find the ecosystem that he was referencing for it. And who would be at New York this weekend from tomorrow? I know you are, Mike. Are you going to be there, Simon?
No, I can't. Too much travels for me. I need to stay a little bit in Zurich and decompress. But Marcus is going from Eternode, and some people from the foundation.
Wish I could be there.
Are you coming to Istanbul?
No, I'm not going to come to Istanbul either.
Bummer.
I'm all out of conferences until probably next year sometime.
Is there an Ethereum conference in South Africa?
There isn't, unfortunately. No, the person who owns the Eth Cape Town, brand hasn't really organized one. And Eth Global, they did have one in 2019, which was really, really cool. But they haven't had one since. So I am looking forward to the next time they have one, because it's always a jam. But it's a long way for everyone to fly. That is the one issue, and a lot of people don't want to fly that far.
Yeah, I want to go.
It is
definitely on my list.
It's definitely worth it. It makes up with being very, very affordable, and it's very, very pretty. But we do have a conference coming up in November, which is kind of like the premier event, called Crypto Fest, unfortunately.
Right.
I'll be doing a 2-hour talk on the Graph protocol there. Which
cool. 2 hour?
2-hour workshop, yeah. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull up. Yeah, it's going to be a workshop, yeah. So I'll take them through everything from introduction to the graph. I'll give them a 5-minute break, and then I'll jump straight into the code. So I'll be able to dump knowledge on them, which is I'm looking forward to, because that conference is very much about, like, it's very corporate. We were there last year, and the Chainlink guys were there, but it's good to show face, and we're looking forward to it.
What's it called again? Crypto
Fest. I'll send a link for it.
I love that name. It's so
pretty cringy. Pretty cringy. But we'll see how it goes. It was a really well coordinated last year, but other than that,
Or like the Bitcoins getting airdrops. That's hilarious. And a Bitcoin spaceship. Future.
Yeah, what's the Ethereum spaceship? They've got a
Right.
tether. They've got a big tether one too. Okay, there's an Ethereum coin and then a big T tether one, and then a lot of Bitcoin ones too. It's mostly Bitcoin ones. It's pretty funny. There's someone that always comes with a Jeep Wrangler with a big Bitcoin sign on the outside, which it's like, yeah, that's not the best way to wrap your car, but I'm not going to judge.
Yeah. That's like asking for a $5 rent stack.
All right. I think that, one for today. We're going to run the whole hour, or we're going to cap it?
We usually just kind of hang out and keep it open in case anyone has questions. But yeah, you're free to drop, man. I really appreciate you coming on today and showing that stuff off. It's really cool.
No, thanks for having me. Always love to present. So I'll be back. I'll hang around just in case anybody jumps in and asks some questions.
Cool.
Ooh, I did actually have a question for anybody who has used it. So if you go graph in it, it asks you the protocol, which is Arweave, Ethereum, Neo, Cosmos, and substreams, which is, I was like, will this generate a substream powered subgraph for me? So I'm just going to try now and see what the hell it does. Mainnet. Oh yeah, it also is PKG file. It's pretty dope. Oh, okay, cool. So this is for when you have a substream and you want to generate a subgraph from the substream. It's PKG file. Oh, that is pretty funky. Have you guys seen that? Is it anyone? Have they spoken about that inside of Build's office hours?
Sorry, I stepped away for a second. What was that again?
The graph init has an option to generate a substream powered subgraph of SPKG file.
Oh yeah, that must be something new that I haven't messed with it yet.
I saw it today when I was using graph init. I was like, wow, it's pretty cool.